All right. Round three. You got just my screen. I'm going to click go. Okay. Good afternoon. Good morning. Hopefully everyone is having a fantastic Wednesday. Getting through the week. That owl is distracting. Okay, cool. This is a quick overview of what we're going to be covering. So going over like quote unquote like the players in the game and the things that you're going to be interacting with. Now I do want to take a step back and like talk about the balanced team learning sessions in general. And there's been like a little bit of feedback that they aren't necessarily for everybody. The topics that we choose for a very specific reason. So like they very much are for everybody. Today, as an example, I'm a product manager at heart. And I'm going to be giving this presentation, but I have Dan as my backup to make sure I don't say anything dumb and to help us reinforce these concepts. So this is very important knowledge to have. There is like a lot of testing that goes on. There's interactions with users, there's interactions with stakeholders, different teammates. But as we go on, please continue to give feedback so that we are making sure that we're giving the most relevant and helpful information. What is path to production? I can't really see who's in the room. Ryan, what is the path to production? You got to go on mute. No, this is awkward. Nobody?
All right, Todd. It's a process and steps you take to get your app from production.
Processes. Nailed it. Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what we're talking about. It's the established environments practices. It's the steps that you take to get the story from the backlog to users officially just using it in production. So basic path starts all the way to your left. It's on your local machine. It then goes to a place where you can test against your buddy's work. And finally, giving that thumbs up, the PM is going to check that box, in accordance with your team's definition of done. Swarm has been dealing with the staging environment thing, and ideally it's in parity with production, meaning all of the technologies are the same versioning, all the updates are the same for both. It's in a safe space. So if it blows up, it's a solid place to let you know that there's something wrong. It's also a good place for your users to come and start testing functionality and making sure that you are addressing their needs and getting that feedback earlier on. I guess Swarm members, how's the KR staging environment going?
It's going.
Dane, do you have any thoughts on KR staging environment?
It's turning to be not a easy kill by any means. Definitely a lot to this.
Yeah. So ideally, like you get everything set up in staging, you get it all working, and then once you get to production, there isn't that much of a lift. Ideally, that's kind of the point of it. So that promised land of production where people get to use it. Any questions on this basic path so far? No. All right, cool. So the DoD, it's a very special place, right? You have multiple levels of security and environment. So you got SIPR, JWICs, biases if you're working for NATO for some reason. This overview is massively simplified. Like there's several additional steps and tools and processes and people to consider. But for the sake of this, we want to just cover the basics to give you an understanding. Since this is like an incredibly important piece of like the software development puzzle. Staging on either side of that arrow can be like an unclassified staging environment. And that's still in parity with production, closed off, all of those things, but it's just moving that risk management line more to the left. And this is because there's sometimes a manual step of like downloading your app onto a disk and sneaker netting it onto the high side. I believe that they have like a few technical solutions that are finally being approved, if not already. So they are getting closer to like that DevOps. And what is DevOps? Anybody in the room? Anybody? Jamie, what is DevOps?
Bringing together development and IT operations. So you're not just throwing stuff over the fence.
That's right. It's giving a shit. All right. So whether it's manual or automated, someone else is doing that work. So deploying and maintaining your software when it's in production. So you 100% care and ask questions to make it easy for them so that when you need the help, you can ask for it. So right now, KR, like looking back at like what we're dealing with now, Kessel Run owns this process end to end, but like a product team doesn't have administrative rights in prod. They have to coordinate with likely a contractor, platform operator that sits at each AOC. When I was working there, and Jamie can attest to this because he did the same stuff, like you send care package, so much beef jerky, just as you would like any other deployed flight mate. When we were out there, we would go and visit every other month, and we would prioritize sitting next to them, making sure that their concerns are heard, and kind of like humanizing the aspect of it. So any questions on like incorporating the DoD practices here? We're going to talk more about the specifics of which you guys are going to be dealing with when Adrian starts diving into platform one. All right, so what is the goal? There's a lot here. There is a lot here. So what is the goal? The goal is yes. Can we push to production? Yep. Eventually, you want this to be a non-event. That's what everyone else in the in the DevOps ecosystem wants. The diagram here is kind of like an automation pipeline that we're going to cover here in a sec. But yes, the goal is yes, we can push. So the how we do that is through CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous delivery. So trying to automate the entire process from code commit all the way to deployment. Consistency is key here. So that allows teams to make those small changes. And ideally, everything's automatically built, it's tested, it's packaged, and this will encourage like more frequent commits. It's less painful, ideally, which allows us to constantly buy down that risk. So the CD portion of this, you can call it one of two things. It's deployment versus delivery. So you initially are likely going to be dealing with that continuous delivery. The difference here is the deployment is no longer like an additional step for that Mrs. Platform Operator out there. She just sees it go into production. The product team pushes, that's it. Unless something breaks along the way, but we're automating everything, right? Questions on this? All right, cool. So big picture, we saw that. So where do we start? What does this look like tactically? So it's the local environment mentioned before. It's your computer plus some cloud tooling. It's mostly made up of your IDE, your teaming tools like GitHub, additionally, your hosting platform. Swarm team, I'm curious, what changes did you guys have to make? This might not be an easy question to answer, but to your processes when you started to working to deploy to KR. Like there were a couple things that you had to change, right? From developing in your building to developing for KR. All right, cool. You build local, so you're not affecting those people in the real world, your users. And being in the Air Force, you clearly have like additional security steps and testing and environment requirements. Developing locally allows you to take more control. It's moving everything to the left. It's making sure that you're developing for the ideal environment. So back to beginning, what was the path to production? Just processes. What kicks that all off outside of user need? Your IPM, you're estimating, you're prioritizing work, you're picking it up. You get the story you're going to go and work on, you start hammering it out in your local environment, you use your Git management tool, whatever that happens to be, and you can coordinate and work off the most recent version of code from that main branch. And then once you're done there, your local staging is where you can bring it back to you, or whatever you happen to call it. You can bring it back to your team stories. You're bringing it back together to see if they work nice. They play nicely with one another. Point here is making sure that you aren't like, there aren't any merge or dependency or feature conflicts. Again, a quick way to de-risk before deploying any additional updates. Step 4 here in that local environment is where your team's definition of done comes into play. Like likely all the other prior steps are getting check marks and thumbs up along as the story and those work items are worked along the ways and promoted through the steps. As I mentioned before, and what you likely deal with on a regular basis, the acceptance environment is where your team is like, hell yeah, that's the functionality that user love, or oh, that's what you meant by those words, the acceptance criteria. It was dependent on X, Y, and Z or whatever. There are also opportunities here to test that end-to-end functionality and demo features to like champion users, help them suss out any like bugs or performance issues, any of that wonkiness. Any questions so far? Cool. Staging environment. All right, what is it? It's a safe space, as we mentioned before. It should work exactly like prod, and that it's a place where you can make sure that your website, your app is working as intended. The resources and restrictions and everything that when the users actually have it, you can test it there. This will be like a big part of Swarm's future as they look to integrate with the customer run suite of AOC like planning tools. Here they'd be able to test in Zipper safely, testing in an unclassified environment. Likely this has already happened, but you're getting the point. It's all about like mitigating risk quickly here. A major piece of that is that we alluded to earlier were pipelines. So the internet is a series of tubes. Just kidding. Pipelines are a major piece of the past production. It's the name given to those automation aspects. So things like code compilation, building and version control, static and dynamic code analysis, security and dependency scans, journey tests, do your buttons work? The diagram that we have built out here is a mock-up of something that you would see in Concourse. That's what they use. I don't know if they still do, but it's the pipeline that you use for PCF specifically. So when instructed, it'll pull from your intended repo. It runs its tests independently, and once all of that pass, it builds it, sends the results back to your repo as well as staging to be manually tested, and finally deployed as that immutable artifact where your platform operators can grab and push it into prods, following their localized steps. Any questions here? All right. So we have our established DevOps pipeline. It's structured, it's automated. The intention here, creating that consistent, high quality, repeatable, and scalable practice. Apparently I was hungry when I was trying to think through examples of like trying to tie this back to something that's a little bit more digestible. Get it? All right, cool. Okay, so at a high, albeit abstract level, pizza pipeline. So your code development on your left here is, gathering all of your ingredients that are documented in your recipe. The continuous integration is going to be like imagine just multiple chefs standing in a row, each with a very specific job to do with their ingredients. Automated testing, you can't really automate. There might be robots in this, I don't know, but checking to make sure that pizza's done and cooked properly all over. Deployment, taking the pizza out of the oven and slicing it up, monitoring feedback, same thing. What can we do to improve our pizza? And I'll quick note that staging was a hard thing to kind of like think about in this like example. So I just imagine like a tiny little pizza that you would make and that you could, I'm projecting that it's quickly cooked. And so you can like test it anyway. All right. Any questions on a pizza pipeline? Anybody hungry? Starving? Awesome. So now that we have introduced the concept of pipelines and we are on that far right section of getting close to deploying into production, what other tools and environments are available to you and your team? Some organizations like Customer Run and many others have a user staging environment that we have covered. In parity with production, you can test, you can have your champion users come in, your devs can test against like unique hardware configurations, the servers, the integrations with other applications or interfaces. There is also different strategies that can be used here, like blue-green deployments. Usually it's for like highly trafficked websites, but it de-risks that push by having both instances, a new and an old one handling user operations. New one fails, keep using the old one, we'll figure it out what went wrong. Any questions? Cool. So some additional information you do with staging. A big thing here, you've heard of smoke tests, like are you burning your pizza? When you turn on, does it catch on fire? The other things here we have covered earlier. So catching a theme of building in processes to make sure that you weren't breaking anything. I brought up champion user testing earlier on, but this is a standard practice of user acceptance testing. Kate's covered with previously with the PMs while they're walking through their linear flows. But the idea is just getting a user to sit in a seat use the things that you guys have updated them on. Questions? Hooray, production. Okay, so you made it. As mentioned at the start, the goal is just to make all that stuff I just talked about, all that process, a non-event. Just click go, it's there. As I hope you notice throughout all the testing that occurs, it makes it important for all the practices to understand. So how do we measure it? How do we measure for being effective? There's a whole organization that studies this yearly, but you don't have to talk with them, just have to know what those metrics are. Each year, the DevOps Research and Assessment, DORA, releases the state of DevOps. And if you are interested, you can just Google it and download it. They are doing like data gathering. I have the PDF if you want to just reach out. But in that state of DevOps reports, they kind of get into like the demographics, the location, the type of business, all that stuff based around these 4 metrics of how often are you deploying? How long does it take to go from start of this presentation to the end? So time from code commit to the production. How often do deployments fail in prod? And if they do, how long does it take to get the thing back on? Once we regularly start using that path to production, like the entire thing, or paths, I suppose, these will become great indicators for your team's success rate through mastering that CI/CD. And I mentioned earlier, Adrian's going to cover some things that you do likely care about. So like how is rapid ref plans to get to prod? As for me, I'm going to pause, see if you have any additional questions, and always open to feedback if you have it. Okay.
So not gonna stand up because I'm stopping the teacher.
Adrian, can you move closer to your machine or to the owl? I don't know what actually the microphone's on.
Hello?
Like we can
Hear me?
kind of hear you.
What? $1,000, I should be able to talk here.
All right, good. I'm just going to turn up my computer.
Oh, is it not loud?
You're good now.
Okay. Couple things. You know, we've been talking with the platform Form 1 folks. So as of now, the status is the Form 9 was submitted, and I don't think anyone's going to stop us from buying it. Even though there are some concerns at the league level, the group level, about whether or not this is the solution for all of our products. It doesn't look like Rapid Ref is going to get this. All right. Path to production is kind of tricky in the sense that at Wavelength we have not deployed software yet. We can get there. I've asked Ryan to give us more, a little bit more background information about like, the things they encountered with Swarm when they're getting through this path, because I think it's easy to think of it as a just a series, like it's a programmer problem, right? We just got to get through the path. But as we're discovering, is that it's everybody's problem because there's documentation that needs to be solved. A lot of the tickets that they're having to address aren't actually like, does your code do X? It's, you know, what is your security policy, right? How are you handling, you know, how are you going to operate your software, right? So the Platform 1, you guys know anything about Platform 1? Okay, so Platform 1, you're probably more of an expert than I am. But Platform 1 has like 2 options, like flavors you can pick. One they call like Big Bang. And Big Bang is almost like, here's a computer, go like, it's on our platform, but you know, we're not gonna do anything for you. Like we're just giving you a computer, go get your own ATO, go get your own CTO, go do it, right? So it's like a hosting solution. The other one is the one we are procuring. It's called, they call it the Party Bus. The Party Bus basically, I don't know what I didn't name it. Okay, so like, I don't know, but like Party Bus is essentially an environment that you can load, you can develop your software. So they come with their own GitLab labs. They come with their own, like basically all the tools that we have internally that we've been using. They have their version there. They also use like Mattermost, which is like a chat tool. It's like their equivalent of like Slack. So that you can talk to the developer. Yeah, not great. But I haven't heard anybody smile when the word Mattermost is said. So I guess we'll find out. It sucks. Okay, well, it's great. That's amazing. But essentially, from that environment, what they are saying is, once you enter the party bus environment, you, unlike Kessel Run, we're not gonna need our like special laptops emailed to us. We're just gonna be able to use what we have, right? But you're gonna CAC authenticate it, right? So once you're authenticated into the environment, you can load your code, you can deploy, you can do all the things that, you know, the normal software development process stuff, right? They are doing stuff behind the scenes. So one of the things they say is when you're in the party bus environment, they can do pen testing on you at any time. Right? So they're going to be actively like trying your software, seeing what happens, right? And there's certain services they are providing that Ryan's gonna go into, and when we talk about the actual pipeline itself. I don't know if it's better if I put it on my laptop or it is, but like basically they have certain like CAC authentication solutions. They have things built into their platform that we are required to use to advance their, right? So platform one is, do you guys know what IL, when I say IL4, IL5, do you know what I mean? All right, so the government is weird. They came up with like this 5-tiered system for like rating information systems, but then they don't use 1 and 2. Like they don't use some of the numbers. All right. So if I say, so in DoD speak, if I say IL2, what that means is a website that your wife can get to without a CAC. Right. So like the base web, the Latin Air Force base website. Right. Something you can just navigate to a Google. So IL3, I've never seen one. All right. IL4 is a CAC authenticated website. All right. IL5 is a CAC authenticated website with like sensitive information. So usually that's usually like this, you know, like I'm trying to think like your fitness scores. Like probably that's probably less important than like medical reasons, right? Your deployment readiness, those types of systems. They have to do a little bit more. Behind the scenes, what's actually happening is IL4 and IL5, like it's how the data centers operated. So like, and I think in an IL4, say, I think in an IL2 environment, the servers can also host non-DoD stuff. So it's like a server that has like, you know, my website and just so happens to have a DoD website, right? But like IL4 and 5, they have to be like a separate server, a dedicated server that just hosts the application. And then when you get higher, it's a dedicated server in a room that's locked and keyed by a government person, right, at the Amazon server. So that's kind of behind the scenes how they make those designations. So how much sensitive the data is, how much security, physical security also has to be applied. Okay. So platform one is a solution all the way up to IL5, which is all NIPR, right? You guys got to get to separate, right? So there is a separate company called DAP CloudWorks, right? CloudWorks, and sometimes they'll be referred to as Odin. Odin is an organization who has basically done under the table drug deals with platform one, and they have an agreement that anything that, so platform one is a state environment, so it's that all the security is in place. So if you pass all the tests in there, you will receive what is it, your ATO CTF. You know what ATO and CTF are? Authority to operate, certificate to field, permission to run your application on the network. Okay. If you build your application within the platform one environment, you inherit their ATO. Like they have their security controls, you follow their rules, therefore you have the same permissions to deploy them. Okay. On the SIPR side, DAP CloudWorks has made an agreement that anything that passes the test in platform one automatically passes the test for CloudWorks. Right. So that's the SIPR solution. So they have negotiated, so what we've separately like purchased through them as well before buying. The ability to get your application, give it to them, have our application in platform one, tell them it's time to move it, and they have come up with a solution, I don't know what it is, to move it to SIPR. It's like to physically take the software and get it to a SIPR environment that is identical to platform one. So they have a party bus environment over there. So they said like they run there at the same like point version level of the software. So they said they expect that anything you load will, anything that works in platform one should, with minor tweaking that they do behind the scenes, work on the separate environment. I don't know what that actually means. And so I'm telling you exactly what we know this one. Okay. And I assume that their solution actually is Ethernet, but they may have something more sophisticated for that. Yeah,
So with Odin versus platform one, will we need, like to onboard onto Odin as well? Or is it literally we're in platform one, we say, okay, we're ready to go Zipper, and then behind the scenes magic happens between platform one and Odin where it now lives on Zipper?
so that's a good question. So basically, if you told us, we need to contact Odin about 8 weeks before we want to be on Zipper, so that we can still get the ball rolling, because there's things that still need to happen on their end, right? So that's gonna be leadership's job, like as, and PM's job, as we get closer to that release date, you guys give us that little twinkle in your eye, it's about to be produced. That it is ready for delivery, that we need to start getting things moving. So don't walk in and just tell me like, it's ready, turn it on and get it to Zipper, like, none of this is gonna happen fast, all right? Yeah.
Sorry, follow up. So with Odin moving from platform one to Odin, do we know what additional elements are required to move to Odin?
You're talking like additional work that's required.
Exactly.
So the whole point that, and this is what they say, so I mean, it's all in, they're saying that if they have a complete reciprocity with platform one, so that no work is required. However, I don't know if that's true.
So during that 8 weeks, that's just like lead time and it won't
Lead
require.
time, I think it's also for them to like coordinate with platform one.
Okay,
with
okay.
cloud space, to do all the things that they're gonna have to do, right, to get it to happen.
And is
So-
that just the first time then?
Yeah, because they said that after that, they said that typically from the moment, like, once it's on board to, like, all the way to the pipeline deployed, if we want to do a version update, they said typically within a business day,
Okay,
they can push an update to that software. They said it's usually faster, but they say, hold us to a business day.
okay.
Which is, we'll see. And that's kind of maybe the big point of all this, that I've never done this before. I don't know, that Swarm is probably the most experienced team that's gone through it, which is why I want you guys to kind of talk about your experiences going through
Well,
this.
that's scary.
But I don't want this to be a scary discussion. There's kind of two things I want to take away. One is an understanding that like we're learning together, like, but I kind of need everybody to be on the ball about this. Like, we don't want to be the long pole in the tent for this to happen, right? That also means we need to be doing the preparatory work. So there's simple things that Brian will get into, like little things that we can do now, right? Making sure we're using the right containers, right? Because I think a platform one requires Iron Bank containers. That's like the core of the application. So making sure that we are using those instead of what we are using right now, right? Those are little things that you can do along the way, right? And again, it could, let's not have another yarn free situation, right? Just,
Well, you'll have to figure that out with what they run on.
yeah, and that's another thing about it. Like, I think our philosophy is that like, the sooner you get in the platform, it's not really a philosophy, like, it's common sense. The sooner you get in the platform, the sooner you're gonna run into these issues. So hopefully you guys run into these issues as you're building it, as opposed to architecting large amounts of code that you find out are all needs to be modified because you broke it. Right? So that's why we're desperately trying to get you in. Now, they said that supposedly in the next 30 to 60 days we'll be in. Like, we'll have everything. There will be training, online training available for the entire Rapid Rep team. I think up to 6 people. So we'll have to think about it. But right now, in my head, all Rapid Rep people should, right? On the engineering side to know what's in the platform. All right. So you'll have an opportunity to do that. Yeah. So with that, any questions?
I got one.
Yeah.
Are we using Odin or Platform One?
So we're using Odin to develop the software. Like
Okay.
that is our, we'll develop low, push, deploy high.
I think you got the platform ended over.
Yeah. Did I
You
mess
said
it up?
it.
Sit open.
Sorry. Platform one is the environment where we will write the code.
Okay,
When we are done, we will push to the production environment on Odin.
okay.
Damn, I'm gonna have to check the recording. In my brain, I swear. Yeah, so we'll develop in platform one, we will deploy on Odin, and yeah, that's kind of what we're doing. Okay, the other thing is, there's going to be, they said, in like after the money goes all the way through, so within 30 days of that, they have a tech fit conversation. The entire Rapid Rep team are you're all gonna go. All right, the whole point of that really is they're gonna talk, like, their engineers are gonna talk about what are we using, and we can figure out like what's compatible, what's not compatible. So they wanna have that conversation before we get involved. All right. Any other? Nothing. All right. I know that this is new for me. We're gonna learn a lot. Like my expectation, the first time we do it will be painful. The second time we do it will be hard. And the third time we'll be teaching other people how to do it. All right? All right, cool. Right? Both of you, whatever you want to show.
Might be here, I mean. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I guess look, it's like a reverse form of this function,
I wish I could screen too.
if you want to.
Oh, cool, okay, I actually, okay. Where you want to, I have not looked at this yet.
I guess for starters, this is essentially what your pipeline will look like and all the checks you need to do for the integration. So that'll be more of like your local side and then in your staging environment. So it'll run a lot of static code analysis and test your build to make sure that your code works with all of your dependencies. Make sure that they can be found, everything will compile, everything will run, and all your tests pass as well. And so like Fortify and SonarQube here are going to be your static code analysis, and it'll put out an error with, or at least when you start, probably a bunch of errors for any cross-site issues you have, or hard-coded passwords or regex that opens you up to like DOS attacks and stuff like that. So you'll have to manage all of that and fix it so that it's in compliance with everything. And then it'll also kind of bridge right here where it changes colors. It'll make a build image. So basically packages up your entire repo or project.
You did what's on that or for this? Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. And then
Okay.
also to go a little bit backwards for pipeline, instead of thinking it as like a one-way path, it's more so like a checklist where I can bring this up. So this is the one we go through for KR. So for all it checks all your environment variables, and then you write a build script that will build your entire project. And for us, we just copy over everything into a file and then or folder and zip it up so that, because for PCF, it's an offline environment. So we need to package our entire project up into a zip so then we can load it into PCF, and then it unzips it and runs it offline. So you need everything pre-installed from their repo for all their dependencies. And then at the end of your CI script, it will connect you to the SecRel repo, which then packages your entire repo into their repo, to which it then runs all of those tests that you see in the continuous integration portion here. And like I said, it's a checklist, so you just have to get all the green check marks on all of these. It'll do static code analysis. It'll check for any conflicts, make sure that it matches up to the same system requirements, where I'd assume that their environment for testing for Zipper will basically be a clone of Zipper that it'll just run offline. So here's all of the same access to dependencies and whether you have access to internet or not. And so if you can pass that, it's essentially like running Zipper locally. And then at the end, it builds that snapshot here, which is what will then essentially approve you for hitting all the boxes to then load into the Zipper environment. And I think you wanted me to mention like what they can start with.
Okay.
I mean, what are the big things, the big surprises when you guys are setting this up?
Figuring out what a pipeline was, so they already had to step up on us. But, the real main thing is making sure that your dependencies match up with what's available to you and also what their environment support. So I think you guys will be running in Kubernetes, so you should have more access to stuff. At least in PCF, there is some of it's outdated, so in terms of like database version or yarn version or really just versioning, there's a lot of conflicts, so we had to keep rolling stuff back, and then one thing caused an issue with one scan, but it'll pass in another. So going back to like the checkboxes, just making sure that everything works together well. The main thing you could probably start on is writing a script that instead of doing all of your commands to build your project locally, getting it to run in a shell script to where you can build your entire project. And if you run that file, it'll tell you whether your project will build and compile or not. The other thing will be connecting to Iron Bank, getting the login process essentially automated and probably a script and environment variables, and then getting your log files and RC files to generate and pull from the Iron Bank repo. So all of your dependencies are managed by a version specific to what they support, and you're not pulling from like the npm.js registry from online. You essentially want to be all managed through their platform, and no outside factors should be affecting it. What other problems do we get?
Oh, I was gonna say, as you guys are going through this process, and stop me if you have stuff to add as well, I would talk to them earlier rather than later about a couple different things. First being a starter app or a skeleton app. Kestrel Run had one for Node that we discovered very, very late. So if you're able to get like a skeleton app, you can kind of see the project structure of their baseline app. Kind of like look off that. I would also during the discussions with them, figure out what sort of package managers you guys are using versus what they expect to use. And then also make sure that they know, like, hey, it's a mono repo. I think you guys still have a mono repo, right? For RapidRep? Yep. Okay. Make sure they know, hey, it's a mono repo. This is how it works. Right now, I think you guys are still on Yarn, so I'd make sure they know that. Specifically, it did look like they had this library in there, but one of the issues we ran into that led to 4 package manager migrations. I think
Somewhere in that.
yeah. So, they had a custom library in there called SNCC. There's an issue with SNCC, regarding Yarn version 1 and mono repos, that it sounds like the functionality for that will not be supported, so it was always failing the SNCC test. It doesn't look like the platform uses that, but just something to be aware of. I would also ask when you're onboarding with them, what all apps in the platform you need access to. Like as we were going along, we would message someone, they would say, hey, we would ask like, hey, how do you do this thing? They say, oh, well, you need, for example, RAD. And we would say, what is RAD? And it's an app we had to be a part of. They might say, what's another one? Like, oh, Nexus. Like, we would say, well, what's Nexus? So when you guys are starting out, I'd suggest saying like, hey, what all apps within your platform do we need access to? What do all of them do? In order for this to actually get to release. And I would also talk to them about the entire process beginning to end, from hey, we onboard to this is how we release, and getting a clear kind of laid out step-by-step picture of that so you guys know what to expect.
And then looking through the platform, one thing, they also do run off SD elements. So once you do get onboarded, it's all based off of like, I guess, industry standard for best practice and like NIST security requirements. So the earlier you can get on those, they'll detail what you need to implement security wise. So as you're developing further and fixing some security concerns, if you all read through those, make sure you know what is like the bottom line required security wise. You need to gear some of your code to that. So even if you go back and like all of your SQL statements, like everything needs to be parameterized. It can't have access like server side or user side. It has to be essentially like isolated, and everything is basically geared around security, like getting on the zipper. So it's making sure that like the general scope of it is like enforce the policy of like least privilege. So anybody on the app should only have like the bare minimum privileges they need to access anything on the app. Like admin stuff should be protected. If you have any seeds in your program, those need to go. You can't have those. Just managing all like, again, SDL is another probably 150 boxes for you to check. Some of it's stupid, some of it actually makes sense.
When you say check out, it's not like a unit test, right? It's a human being on the other end.
Guys, bro, it's like it tells me to do this and you need to like in your code exactly where that happens. So they say like, where do you limit like character input into the app? You need to link them to like every regex for every text box you have in your app. And then I assume you'll probably also have to add in like logging's a huge thing too. If you start working on where your logs are gonna come from, where they're gonna be stored, if they're accessible by anybody, a time clock on how long they're stored for. I guess in the code, this is like essentially what like your CI file will look like when you link it to Git. So you establish like what it is and then what branch you're gonna run it on. So every time we merge into main, the pipeline runs. So every time you make a merge, you'll know exactly what's wrong with it, where you stand on it, and just keeping an eye on that so stuff doesn't run out of date. This is just for like authentication from KR. So a lot of this links to the image or the image repository. So that's where we're pulling all of our images from. Here's where you don't build it. So again, you write this build script where it goes through, builds your entire thing, packages it up, and then zips it and stores it in here. So this file right here is about the only thing we're actually loading into PCF. And then it connects there through these manifest and routing files where it uses a build pack for the zip file, and then you link the services to it. It routes it to exactly where it's going inside of the app so that it can find it again, because ours runs offline and you have all your setup there. And then here's where you connect to their image repository. So when you do build, this signs on, it pulls down whatever images you need. And then when you generate your log file, it pulls all of them from the image repository instead of where like this URL here is probably just links to npm.js registry. So you're pulling the online images that can be modified by version, where this gives a SHA code to each image so that it's very specific. And if anybody was trying to modify them on the other end, they can't, because it's like a essentially unique identifier to each image you're using to build and run your project. I think that's generally all I have.
Scroll down. Is there a list of like specific tools?
Oh, yeah, so Iron Bank will be for your images, bcloak will be for Kagan. I'd assume zipper token authentication. I don't know much about keycloak.
Do we have anybody with the security plus, set plus certification? Well, he his was expired. So because I noticed someone, it was like Sec Plus certification is gonna be required, and we wanted to manage our practice, we want to configure keycloak. You didn't, So that means that
I think Scott's going to show off how many we'll have it when he gets here. I think that's so he has. No, sorry, not Sean. That's our.
Cool. I feel like in terms of like actually help or understanding on it, it mostly helps if you don't understand any of this, or you have questions, if you ask, because there is a lot going on.
Yeah, please ask us. Also,
Can I get that link to that page right there?
Yeah, so
Platform one.
I'll send you guys this information as well as, I'll send you guys the bill. So you can see, because it describes in detail, like the license, like specific software that you're gonna be using for everything.
also as a side note, just based off looking at this, it looks like you guys are going to need to migrate from Yarn to NPM. Please come see us. We can help you do that. We have spent a lot of time working on packet migration. So looks like you will just at least start with this, have to migrate to NPM. It looks like you will still be able to use Jest, which is good. I know Postgres, at least when we're using the Swarm skeleton, Postgres is in there. This is kind of a smaller thing, but with Postgres, definitely check with them, see if PLV8 is supported in their Iron Man container, because KR did not support PLV8, which I assume that's still in your Postgres question mark. Okay, but check with them, see if that's supported or not. If not, we also had to migrate away from PLV8, so we can help you with that as well.
So why don't we take maybe it'd be good for the group that's one and have our meeting together, like make a list of questions.
Yeah.
When you go to the tech bit, meeting and look up our percentage of beforehand.
Yeah. And where do you probably sit at? I was gonna say, are you okay with us sitting in on it?
Yeah,
Okay,
everyone can come.
okay,
More meetings for everybody.
all right.
Also, if you have any questions now, anything we said.
This is the journey to the expected one.
It'll probably
that up. Because it's gonna be challenging.
It'll probably be long and painful, I'm sorry.
No, but what?
It'll probably be long and painful, but at Swarm, we have spent a lot of time doing the long and painful things, so we hope to make it less long and painful for the rest of you. So please ask any questions you have.
That's it.
Ian, if I could add one thing, like, just from a PM's perspective, like, especially someone who's not as, doesn't have as much tech background, like, a lot of this stuff, unlike a Figma file, is kind of hard to understand and visualize. So like, the idea of over communicating, you know, from a PM dev team or PM design, just over communicating, and these kind of things, can really help, streamline the process.
On a communication note too, obviously it sounds like they're on Mattermost. Mattermost is not fun, will it be helpful? In some ways, yes, like it'll definitely help you to communicate with them. It kind of is not optimal to have to check with Slack and Mattermost, but recommend y'all like use Mattermost a lot to communicate with them. And then kind of like rock off that. Hopefully with their environment, you won't be able to not use Slack, like it won't be completely blocked, like it has been with Pestle Run. So hopefully you can run them both, but just be aware, like you'll probably have to have a lot of your communication on Mattermost. So get used to that, kind of get used to that tool. Yeah. Any other questions, stuff like that?
What is your favorite part of the pipeline?
My favorite part of the pipeline.
The fact that that's nothing you are.
I will say it's a very slow process, but also is rewarding when something finally like works and you get through a part of it. Yeah. Definitely relish the small victories too, I'd say, because there will be a number of small victories you have to make. It might take a while before you get to the big victory. So just something to be aware of.
All right. Any other? All right, well then, let's call it 4 minutes early. It's a good day for our meeting. Thank you all. Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you.
Thank you.